Okay, so if we're actually painting, what we're going to do is you guys are going to have one of these palettes. Gouache is great because even when we stick it in here and it dries up, we can use it the next day. We can reactivate the paint by adding some drops of water. So you're not going to wash your palette daily. You're going to wash your palette at the end of this project. So I know from looking at my photo that I'm going to need some greens and I'm going to need some other colors here. So let's go back to my picture. Alright, where is my photograph? Make sure for finding your photo that you go ahead and add it to your favorites. That's going to make it a lot easier to find in all of your pictures that you have going on in class. Alright, let's see. Alright, so let's start by adding some colors. So I'm going to take, so I have an emerald green here. And I'm just going to gently squeeze about a pea-size glob of paint. Because we're doing our testing, we don't need tons of paint. You also don't want to paint with this very thickly. So this whole tube of paint should last your entire table group for at least 3 assignments. So we really want to be gentle with these. We don't want to overdo it. So I'm going to put in my 2 different greens. And then what's nice about this set is I also have 2 different yellows. So in the oil pastel set, we only had 1 yellow. Here we have what's called a medium yellow. So this is actually going to have a little bit more of like a warm orange tone to it. But then we also have a lemon yellow, which is going to be a cooler yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and stick that in right next to it. We have white. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stick my white over here. And I also have my blues. So with my blue, the darkest blue I actually have is an ultramarine. And then I have a blue lake, which is going to be more like a sky blue. So I don't think I'm going to put that into my palette right now. But to make my blue darker, I am going to get the brown out, which is the burnt sienna, which is more of a red brown. And I'm just going to add that over here so that if I do need to make a darker blue or a brown color, I've got those together. So here's my palette. I've left some spots for mixing in here and then also the central panel for mixing. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to label this my gouache color matching. So here we go. So gouache is spelled Gouache. So gouache color matching. Alright, and so the first thing I'm going to color match is going to be my lime. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to write lime. And then I'm going to start with my my tints, or my light values. So I'm going to go ahead and on this line, I'm just going to sort of mix some light values. So gouache is a lot like watercolor. You want to use water to activate the paint. You're not painting with it thick, so you're not just dipping this in and just like, oh, in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a little bit of water, and you can see that I'm mixing it in here on the side, and it's becoming thin, almost like the consistency maybe of Kool-Aid. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start with this green, because I'm going to mix my greens with a couple different colors here, and I'm going to just do a strip here with this emerald green. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush. And because I'm working on light colors, I'm going to see what happens when I add all my different colors. So I'm going to take a little bit of white now that I've cleaned my brush. Same thing, I'm going to just dip this in and get the white to about the consistency of Kool-Aid here. And then I'm just going to take a section here and I'm going to paint the white into my green and I'm going to mix it. Now you can also mix in the tray, or you can mix directly on the paper with gouache. So here you can see I've created this lighter green, and if I want I can continue to sort of bring this down clean my brush off before I go back to the white. I'm going to sort of squeegee my brush off a little bit. I'm going to get a little bit more white, and I'm actually going to work this way, going backwards, so that I can mix the white into this green and I can show a gradient here. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take the lemon yellow. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a drop of water in there. I'm going to mix it in so I get the consistency of Kool-Aid. And I'm going to mix this in. The cool part about gouache is even if the paper dries, the paint is still going to mix together. Some of the colors won't mix as smoothly, but overall it tends to mix fairly smooth. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to bring some of this out, and you can see how it just sort of, I'm able to bring it out in a gradient with that. So what I'm also going to do is make sure that I'm labeling. So this is with white, and this is with lemon yellow. And then my main color that I did here was emerald green. And I just spelled emerald wrong. Oh, the joys of being dyslexic. I forgot an E. There we go. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use that medium yellow. Same thing. I keep saying it because I just don't want you to paint with really thick paint. I'm going to go ahead and put a drop of water there. I'm going to sort of bring it off to the side, get that Kool-Aid consistency going. And then I'm going to go ahead and make another little dab here, and I'm going to go ahead and mix these two together. All right, and then I'm going to work on just sort of scrubbing it down so that I have, okay, here's my medium yellow. All right. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do for my lights here is I'm going to go ahead and take the apple green that we have here, this lighter one. Same thing, just going to get that a little more liquidy, and then I'm going to add this on top of this darker green, just so we can see what happens here. I'm going to mix them together, and I'm going to go ahead and pull that down into a gradient. Okay, so that was our, oh, they're calling it leaf green. All right, so that's my first set of color matching for tints or light values using the emerald green. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, but I'm going to take the leaf green, and I'm going to go ahead over here and I'm going to paint in a row, just like I did earlier with the emerald green, with my leaf green. And I'm going to start color matching. So you can see it's a similar process that we did with the oil pastel, and some of this is not just for figuring out how our colors mix together, but also figuring out how to manipulate and control the paint. So I'm just going to start the same thing. I'm going to take my white, and in this first section I'm going to go ahead and create this square of white, and I'm just going to sort of blend this in. Now remember, when the paint is really wet, they will have a tendency to bleed into each other. So you may not get super clear, straight, visible lines, and that's okay. We're just really experimenting and seeing what happens here. I'm going to just bring that down, and then I'm going to do like I did before and come back up with white at the bottom, just so we can see what happens with that gradient. So here is, so this is leaf green, and this is by adding white. So then we're going to do the same thing. So then we're going to do lemon, and then we're going to do medium yellow. And we already know what happens when we mix leaf green into emerald green, so we don't really need to do a second one of those. So I'm going to go ahead back to this lemon, and it's still watery from earlier, so I can just go ahead and dip that straight in. I'm going to just sort of mix that in, make sure that they're getting nice together, and then I'm just going to sort of bring that down. And I'm going to come into my medium yellow. Same thing, I'm just going to mix that in. And then I'm going to create just a gradient coming down off of that so we can see the difference there in the values that we have. Okay, so I'm going to do this now. So that was for my lights for my lime. And now I'm going to work on my midtones. And so I'm going to think about like what colors can I add to this to get midtones, and then also my shadows. So I'm going to just do a quick shadow demonstration, and then I'm going to do midtones actually in class, and I'm going to do tints in class as a demonstration, but probably with the cherries so that you get both greens and you also get reds. You're going to be doing this for each one of your fruits again. This is going to be a step that you're going to have to show to me before you move on to actually painting your picture. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my green and I'm going to go ahead and just sort of, for my shadows, I'm just going to make this box here for my shadow tones. And I'm just going to paint that in. Okay, get that nice and painted in. And then I'm going to start by adding my shadow colors. So I'm going to just go straight up with the brown and just see like what happens if I add just the brown gouache straight to this green. What's going to happen here? So I'm just going to work on mixing those in. You can see I'm just sort of gently working this. I'm not pushing hard on the brush. Notice I'm not like slamming down on the brush. I'm being very gentle. You want to work really gently with the brush. You don't want to flatten it down, press the bristles. This is you're having a delicate hand. Okay, so this is with the burnt sienna. So I'm just going to write BS here for now. So that's the burnt sienna. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the ultramarine, which is our darker blue in this set. So it's not as dark as the Prussian blue. It has a little bit more of a purple tinge to it. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this in now. Now notice my paint is never thick. I'm always using it thin. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm painting that in now with my ultramarine and making sure that the colors are mixing together. So I'm going to go ahead and write ultramarine. And then for the last one here that I want to do is I'm actually going to take the ultramarine. I'm going to mix it over here. I'm going to clean my brush. This is super important. Try to keep your colors separate and clean. Clean your brush in between dipping. I'm going to get a little bit of brown and I'm going to mix them together. So I've already made a slightly darker brown, but it's not as dark as I'd like. I'm going to clean my brush again. I'm going to bring a little bit more blue into this. And depending on which brown you use, you're going to actually create fairly dark blues. You can actually get almost a black by mixing more blue than brown. But you would have to use a darker brown than this. This is more of a red brown, so you're going to keep getting sort of a purple tone to this. So I wanted this. Alright, so it's going to look kind of a purpley brown here. And I'm going to go ahead now and add this in to my green. Now I will have a couple of tubes of a darker brown that you guys can use to mix in. So that way for those of you who have some really deep shadows, you can work on creating some dark colors. But you can see that's a fairly dark value. Alright, so this is burnt sienna plus ultramarine. Okay, and I forgot to pull each one of these out in a gradient, so I'm going to do that now. Just so we can get sense of what we got going on here. And you can see it's somewhat dry, but it's still coming, it's still bleeding down fairly nicely. Gouache will still be somewhat workable even if you add water to it. But you do have to be careful because you can see here how I've pulled up some of the color. All right, so these are some of the ways that you can do some highlights and shadows. I'm going to definitely do more of a demonstration on this in class. So I want you guys to, for those of you who are a little bit ahead, you're going to watch this video and you're going to get started with your color matching. Please don't forget to watch the video on brush cleaning. It's really imperative that we keep the brushes super, super nice, and thank you for watching.